Let me give you 3 facts, and then I want you to tell me which country they belong to. In the entire 2026 CONMEBOL qualifying campaign, 18 matches, the hardest road to any World Cup on earth, one team conceded just 5 goals. 5. While Brazil conceded 19. While Colombia conceded 20. While Uruguay led in 24. That same team finished second in CONMEBOL, above Brazil, above Colombia, above Uruguay, 9 points behind the world champions. And they did all of this while starting the campaign with a 3-point deduction they never deserved to pay. The answer is Ecuador. Now here is the question nobody is seriously asking. How does a country that the world barely notices build the most defensively airtight team in South American football history? The answer is not a golden generation. The answer is one man, one system, and one of the most quietly devastating tactical decisions in modern international football. Sebastián Beccacece arrived in Ecuador in August 2024. Not as a savior, not as a big name, as a replacement. Ecuador had just exited Copa America 2024 in the group stage. No wins, eliminated without a fight. The Football Federation needed someone who could stabilize the team for the qualifying stretch that would determine whether Ecuador went to the 2026 World Cup or watched it from home. They appointed a 43-year-old Argentine who had never played professional football. Let that sink in. The man now taking Ecuador to the World Cup, the man who built the most solid defensive structure South American football has seen in decades, never made it as a player. He realized in his teens that he wasn't good enough, walked away from a game, and chose a completely different path, understanding football at a level most professionals never reach. He spent years as an assistant under Jorge Sampaoli, Chile's national team, Argentina's national team, the 2015 Copa America, the 2018 World Cup in Russia. He was never the name on the press conference banner. He was the one who built the tactical architecture that made those teams work. And here is the thing nobody tells you about Beccacece. While everyone associates Sampaoli with chaos and high pressing and attacking madness, his assistant was quietly developing a completely different philosophy. More structured, more patient, built from the back. Ecuador was about to become his proof of concept. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what Ecuador had in August 2024 and what they were missing. They had extraordinary individual talent. Moises Caicedo, the Chelsea midfielder, who had become one of the most complete defensive midfielders in the Premier League. Willian Pacho, 22 years old, a Champions League winner with PSG, whose former coach Mark van Bommel had called a future elite of European football. Piero Hincapié, 22 years old, already established at Arsenal after years at Bayer Leverkusen. Pervis Estupiñán, AC Milan. Joel Ordóñez, Club Brugge. This was not a squad of second-tier players. This was a group of elite European club footballers. One of the most talent-dense squads in South American football. What they didn't have was a collective identity, a clear structure, a shared language on the pitch. Individual excellence without collective organization is just expensive chaos. South America's qualifying is not the place for chaos. Is 18 matches across 3 years, home and away against the world's most dangerous footballing nations, in cities at altitude in Quito, in swamp heat in Guayaquil, on pitches in Lima and Bogota and Montevideo, where the crowd itself becomes a weapon against you. In the 2022-23 cycle, Ecuador went out in the group stage in Qatar. Enough chances, not enough structure. Beccacece walked in with a blueprint. He just needed the players to trust it. To understand how Beccacece builds a team, you need to understand where he came from and the detail about his life that almost nobody outside Argentina knows. He was born in Rosario in 1980, the same city as Lionel Messi. His twin brother, Aníbal, played football locally. Sebastián tried, right back, amateur clubs in Rosario, and somewhere in his late teens arrived at an honest conclusion. He wasn't going to make it at the highest level. Most people who face that reality disappear from football entirely. Beccacece went in the opposite direction. He started working as an assistant at a series of small Peruvian clubs, Sport Boys, Coronel Bolognesi, Sporting Cristal, learning the game from the inside. Not from a playing career, but from the technical area, the video sessions, the tactical blueprints. Then, in 2012, Sampaoli came calling. Joined Chile's national team staff. And Beccacece spent 3 years helping build one of the most transformative international teams South American football had produced in a generation. Chile won the 2015 Copa America. They were tactically revolutionary, high press, positional aggression, intense structure. But Beccacece learning from those years wasn't about the press. It was about what happens when tactical clarity meets physical commitment. When every player knows his exact responsibility in every phase. When he got his first head coaching job at Universidad de Chile in 2016, then Defensa y Justicia, then Independiente, then Racing Club, each posting added a layer. At Defensa y Justicia in 2021, he won the Recopa Sudamericana, defeating Palmeiras on penalties. A small Argentine club beating the Copa Libertadores champions. It was the clearest possible signal of what Beccacece could do with limited resources and a clear system. Elche followed, a difficult posting at a club fighting relegation in La Liga. He couldn't save them, but the experience of coaching in Spain, of understanding how European tactical structures work under extreme pressure, became part of his toolkit. When Ecuador came calling in August 2024, Beccacece already had 21 years of coaching experience behind him. He had never been the most visible coach in the room. He had always been the one who understood the room better than anyone else in it. Beccacece arrived in Ecuador with a problem before he even started. The Court of Arbitration for Sport had ruled that Ecuador must begin the 2026 CONMEBOL qualifying campaign with a 3-point deduction, punishment for the Byron Castillo passport scandal from a previous cycle. A defender who had played in 8 of Ecuador's qualifying games had used falsified documents, and while Ecuador kept their 2022 World Cup place, the penalty carried forward. So before a single ball was kicked in 2026 qualifying, Ecuador were already at -3 points. Their first game? A 1-0 loss away to Argentina. At that moment, Ecuador's CONMEBOL campaign read, played 1-0 points, -3. What Beccacece did next is the story. He didn't panic. He didn't overhaul the system. He kept his nerve and held to the blueprint he had already installed in training. A compact 4-4-2, 2 disciplined banks of 4 midfielders and forwards pressing in specific patterns, Caicedo acting as the shield in front of the back 4, and, most importantly, the defensive partnership of William Pacho and Piero Hincapié given clear, defined roles and the freedom to express their quality within a rigid structure. Wins over Uruguay and Bolivia steadied the campaign. Ecuador conceded almost nothing. Opponents found it nearly impossible to penetrate the central channels. Then came the Colombia away game. One of the most hostile environments in South American football, Bogotá, at altitude, against a side with attacking quality across every position. Ecuador won 1-0. Inter Valencia, a 36-year-old captain, the country's all-time top scorer, with 49 international goals, making one more crucial run and putting the ball exactly where it needed to go. A 1-0 loss away to Brazil in September 2024 was their second defeat, and their last. Across the remaining matches, Ecuador didn't lose again. 8 wins, 8 draws, home and away against some of the most dangerous squads in world football. On June 10, 2025, they drew 0-0 in Lima, Peru. Qualification confirmed. Then, on September 9, 2025, the final qualifier, Ecuador beat Argentina 1-0 at the Estadio Monumental Banco Pichincha in Quito. Inter Valencia, on his 100th international appearance, converted a penalty in the 13th minute of first-half stoppage time. Argentina, the world champions, had been reduced to 10 men by Nicolas Otamendi's red card in the 31st minute. Ecuador held on. Both teams ended with 10 men. Caicedo was sent off early in the second half, but the scoreline held. The final CONMEBOL qualifying table told the full story. Ecuador second, 29 points with a 3-point deduction already applied. Only 9 points behind world champions Argentina. And the defensive numbers that nobody was talking about, 5 goals conceded across 18 matches. 13 clean sheets across the full campaign, a CONMEBOL qualifying record. Under Beccacece alone, 16 matches in charge, just 4 goals conceded, and only 2 in competitive matches. In modern international football, where attackers operate at the highest level of technique and tactical awareness, those numbers are not just good. They are historically extraordinary. But here is the complication, the thing that keeps this story honest. Beccacece was criticized the entire time. In Ecuador, fans accustomed to a pressing, attacking style of football under previous coaches found his system too conservative. Not enough goals. Too defensive. Too cautious. The criticism wasn't coming from people who didn't care about football. It was coming from people who loved their national team and wanted to see them attack. And they had a point worth examining. Ecuador scored 14 goals in 18 qualifying matches, joint third fewest in CONMEBOL. Their attack has a legitimate question mark hanging over it. Inter Valencia is 36 years old. He was extraordinary in qualifying, 6 goals, more than any other Ecuadorian, but the young forwards behind him have not yet established themselves at the same level. Leonardo Campana, Gonzalo Plata, John Yeboah, real talent, but no consistent goal threat that the world takes seriously as a danger in knockout football. The World Cup group doesn't allow much margin either. Group E: Germany, Ivory Coast, Curaçao. Germany is not a team you defend against for 90 minutes without moments of real danger. Ivory Coast, the Africa Cup of Nations champions, are fast, physical, and dangerous in transition. And there is a broader tactical question that experienced observers of international football will recognize. Can the most defensively solid team in CONMEBOL history create enough in the final third when it actually matters? Because the World Cup is not an 18-game marathon. It is a succession of elimination moments where one mistake ends everything. This is the genuine tension in Ecuador's story. Beccacece has built a machine that is almost impossible to beat. But the question is whether that machine can score enough to make it count when the knockout rounds demand goals. The players themselves have the talent. Caicedo, at his best, can change games in both directions. Pacho and Hincapie are already among the best central defenders in European football. Kendry Páez, 19 years old, Chelsea's midfield prodigy, brings creative threat that may yet become Ecuador's most dangerous attacking weapon at this tournament. The system works. The test is whether it can win. The morning of June 17, 2026. Philadelphia, Lincoln Financial Field, Ecuador versus Ivory Coast. Beccacece walks into the technical area with a squad that has not lost a competitive match since September 2024. A squad built around the best defensive record in CONMEBOL history. A squad that beat the world champions to finish qualifying, that held Brazil, Colombia, Uruguay, and Argentina to almost nothing. And also a squad carrying all the weight of a small country's biggest footballing ambitions. Here is the payoff of the whole story. What Beccacece built is not what people think they're watching when they watch Ecuador. When the neutral observer sees a cautious 4-4-2 and a team that defends with discipline and wins 1-0, they see caution, pragmatism, safety. What they are actually seeing is structure so carefully designed that elite South American attackers, players from Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, spent 3 years trying to find a crack that wasn't there. Willian Pacho, the kid who grew up in poverty in Quinine, who played his first football in a neighborhood plagued by gangs, is now a Champions League winner. Piero Hincapie started in the Champions League final just days before the World Cup began. Moises Caicedo is the 4th most expensive transfer in Premier League history. These are not players who need protection. These are players who needed a frame. And Beccacece gave them one. The question the hook planted at the start of this video was never about whether Ecuador had good players. It was about how a man nobody saw coming turned elite individual talent into something that became genuinely terrifying to play against. He did it in less than 2 years, without ever having played a single professional game. Beccacece Ecuador represents something that is increasingly rare in international football, a coherent tactical idea, executed with discipline, built in a short period of time, and producing results that exceed every reasonable expectation. The conversation about golden generations is always about the players, the names, the clubs they play for, the transfer fees. And those things matter. Caicedo, Pacho, Hincapie, Páez are genuinely world-class. But world-class players without a structure are just talent waiting to be wasted. What makes this Ecuador story different is the man who refused to be impressed by the talent and instead asked, what do these players do together? How do we make the whole harder to beat than any of its parts? The answer was 5 goals conceded in 18 matches. The answer was 2nd place in CONMEBOL, above Brazil and Colombia and Uruguay. The answer is a World Cup debut in Philadelphia on June 17th. The rest is still being written. But I want to know what you think. Is Ecuador a dark horse at this tournament, or are they limited by their attacking output? Let me know in the comments.